Now we all know the saying, always leave them wanting more, and when it comes to video games, players definitely put more time in than any film or television series, and even releases with poor receptions can still get countless people throwing dozens of hours away attempting to reach that final cutscene. And while it would be a serious stretch to say that any of the titles that we're covering today were universally redeemed by their endings, they are still good examples of how a writer's imagination can still manage to give even the worst video games a semi-satisfactory feeling at the end. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 terrible video games with incredible endings. Number 10, Drake of the 99 Dragons. Not only did the poor reception of Drake of the 99 Dragons scupper any plans for a series, but also a whole planned multimedia franchise that would have spanned comic books and even an animated TV show. That's how short this game fell of expectations. Drake of the 99 Dragons follows the story, unsurprisingly, of the protagonist Drake, an assassin that belongs to a clan known as, again no prizes here, the 99 Dragons. The plot of the game revolves around Drake attempting to stop antagonist Tang from harvesting lost souls from the Soul Realm to power his cyborg army. Now this game was labelled the worst ever title to be released on the original Xbox, with critics complaining about the control scheme, glitchy gameplay and camera system that often ends up stuck behind a wall or obstacle. Now there are a few good ideas bubbling away under the surface, however, with the game's ending perhaps being the best example of this. Having defeated Tang, Drake's final fight comes when he falls down a pit containing a three-headed beast named the Spirit Lord Supreme. Defeating it will reward the player with a satisfying closing scene of Drake reviving his master and being told that he's proven himself to the gods in a way that no one else has managed. It's a nice moment, but it's in an otherwise infuriating game. Number 9, Resistance 2. Resistance Fall of Man landed as a launch title for the PS3 way back in 2006 and delivered not only a superb showcase of the console's capability, but also a pretty immersive storyline. The grittiness of Sergeant Nathan Hale and his quest to free England from the Chimera was sadly not replicated in the game's 2008 sequel. Resistance 2 felt like a title from a completely different series, with a far more Hollywood blockbuster, showy sort of feel to it. The local co-op feature from Fall of Man was also removed, leading to some pretty scathing reviews from fans that wound up putting the series on a decline that it would never recover from. Despite these sweeping, controversial changes, Resistance 2 was at least able to deliver a fitting finale. With Hale becoming more and more infected throughout the game, Resistance 2 closes with a final scene of the hero from the first two games finally succumbing to the virus, and then being put out of his misery with a foreboding shot of an assortment of planet-like structures up in the sky. Now this game might have been a sequel that fell well short of the mark, but there's no denying its ending proved to be a fitting closing chapter for Nathan Hale and a rather ominous setup for Resistance 3. Number 8, No Man's Sky. Now, No Man's Sky is definitely not a terrible game in terms of how it looks, sounds, or even plays, but its launch remains one of the best or worst examples of how to absolutely destroy a game upon release. Hyped up as one of the most immersive sci-fi titles ever released, No Man's Sky quickly became an example of too much hype and not enough delivered, with a slew of features being absent from the initial launch. What it did have, however, was a damn good storyline ending in the game's Artemis Path plot. Having uncovered the mysteries of the Artemis, the Atlas, and the universe, players are given one final choice between helping save the Atlas by essentially hitting the reset button, or continuing on their merry way by rejecting the offer. Accepting the offer will see the player whisked off to a new galaxy in a new body, though they will still be able to use the space anomaly's interstellar terminus to travel back to the previous galaxy. In a main storyline filled with choices to make, this huge one certainly makes for a fitting finale for players to grapple with. Number 7, Sonic Unleashed. Now, Sonic Unleashed will always have a kind of special place in our hearts for just how utterly weird it was, but there's no denying that it remains one of the most controversial entries in the Blue Hedgehog's franchise. Coming out on the back of infamous titles Sonic 06 and Shadow the Hedgehog, the future of the series was resting on Sonic Team getting their bloody act together for Unleashed. The decision, therefore, was to have roughly half of the game played in an all-new Werehog form. It certainly was a bold choice. The Werehog portions of the game drew almost all the criticism from fans and critics upon release, with complaints being drawn towards the clunky mechanics, slow-paced level design, combat, and rather frustrating platforming. But whilst Unleashed might not be the perfect Sonic title, its ending remains one of the most fulfilling that the series has ever managed. Unlike most titles in the series, the bulk of the game's narrative is spent solely around Chip, Sonic's companion, who players run into at the start of the game and attempt to uncover his identity. The game's finale not only answers this question, but also has a fitting sign-off for the character, with the pair teaming up to defeat Dark Gaia, as well as save the world and then bid a final farewell to one another. Number 6, Tomb Raider: The Angel of Darkness. 2003's Tomb Raider: The Angel of Darkness is such a bad game that it's reached the point of infamy where a small, and I mean very small, cluster of fans that, having been burdened with it perhaps as a Christmas or birthday gift, have actually begun to like it. And I don't want to tell people what to think or anything like that, but seriously, no, this is not a good game. Despite having some strong sales on the back of an aggressive marketing campaign, Angel of Darkness was plagued by some pretty hefty frame rate drops that made players feel like they were interacting with some levels in bloody slow motion. But being one of the worst received titles of the 2000s, the narrative and storyline in Tomb Raider's 6th main entry did actually earn some plaudits at the time. With themes based around intrigue and black magic, the game reaches a dramatic finale as Lara discovers CARTEL has been secretly aiding her throughout the game. He offers her the chance to join him, but is killed once she uses whatever plot MacGuffin is going on at the moment to destroy whatever plot MacGuffin area that they're fighting in. The game's final shot sees Lara smiling to herself as she strides into the darkness of a monster's cage. Not only does it actually tee up the next entry pretty well, but Angel of Darkness's breathless ending really reflects on the overall mood of this Lara, better than plenty of other titles in the series. Number 5. Rogue Warrior. First-person shooter Rogue Warrior had a seriously troubled development cycle. Bearing no relation to the classic 1992 autobiography by Richard Machinko, the game was initially developed by independent American developers Zombie Studios. Bethesda, dissatisfied with Zombie's progress, then took the game away from the company and gave it to British developers Rebellion Developments, and essentially told them to just make a completely new title. The end result is a video game that is never far enough away from a list of the worst titles that ever saw the light of day. With its storyline of Machinko infiltrating North Korea and disrupting ballistic missile launchers, the game suffers from awful controls, stripped-back features, poor graphics, and a whole slew of glitches. But you know what? Its ending is actually pretty good. Having been told that he's facing a court-martial for disobeying orders, Machinko's final acts in the game involve blowing up a palace containing a bunker of missiles and destroying a Soviet submarine. Now, saving the day in such a showy way is one thing, but the closing shot of Machinko clearing his name by handing over the computer chip containing all of the information needed to sort out his court-martial hearing is an extra dose of satisfaction for players. Number 4. Aliens Colonial Marines. Aliens Colonial Marines should have been a blockbuster classic for the ages. Set immediately after the classic 1986 James Cameron flick, Colonial Marines features iconic characters such as Corporal Dwayne Hicks, Bishop, and Michael Wayland, but fell painfully short when it came to living up to the series' continuity. The claustrophobic paranoia that made the first two films such classics was nowhere to be found. The dialogue was atrociously simplified, and the characters were all painfully one-dimensional. However, crappy dialogues and poorly written characters are small blemishes against the mess that was the game's many technical bugs. But with all of that being said, there is some decent fun to be had in how the game's storyline actually wraps up, well, for those who are able to actually make it that far. Having been confronted with one final boss battle against the Xenomorph Queen, Captain Cruz sacrifices himself for the greater good by launching a dropship into the Xenomorph and then booting them both out into space. What then follows is a tense exchange with Wayland, who is executed by Hicks and revealed to be an android. Bishop closes out the game by connecting himself up to the Wayland android with his "We've got everything we need" line ringing out as the ship drifts off into space, creating an ominous final shot. Number 3. Army of Two: The Devil's Cartel. Now, while a score of 58 out of 100 is certainly nothing to write home about, in the case of Army of Two: The Devil's Cartel, poor reception and even poorer sales ended up into the closure of an entire company. The third entry in a series that never really found the winning formula, The Devil's Cartel proved to be the entry that really killed off its reputation. Like with Resistance 2, co-op interactions were removed, and players were only able to control Alpha, and the overall storyline failed to match the same sort of weight as its predecessors. With that being said, The Devil's Cartel was able to deliver a finale that had a decent impact for anyone who soldiered through the main campaign. The decision to make Salem, protagonist of the original title, the big baddie of the piece, was certainly a controversial one, but the scene of Bravo holding a gun to his head is legitimately tense. The game closes with Alpha and Bravo picking up their next mission, Salem behind bars, and with a mysterious visitor approaching him. It might have been the game that killed off a series, but there's no denying that this ending did a fine job in keeping the door at least slightly open. Number 2. BUBSY 3D. So So BUBSY 3D was the fourth entry in the series and the first to make the leap into the world of 3D, but sadly was doomed from the start. Released in 1996 alongside Crash Bandicoot and Super Mario 64, it was undoubtedly the ugly triplet, as 3D exploration became the hot new thing for the industry. The game's visuals, gameplay, controls, and overall character were almost universally panned, and retrospective looks at this infamous title have only brought more scathing reviews over the years. But one possibly redeeming aspect of this disaster class of a release is the game's appeal to a younger demographic of players, with the simple storyline of BUBSY attempting to get off of an alien planet being very easy to grasp. But the game's ending, however, well, it holds back one last punch for players. You see, there are two different endings that players can get at the end of BUBSY 3D, depending on their progress during the game. If BUBSY collects fewer than 32 rocket parts, his rocket ship will fail and leave him stranded in space. If he collects more than 32, his ship will rip through the space-time continuum, leaving him stranded in the Stone Age with Woolies invading Earth either way. And you know what, if we're being honest, either option kind of works for us. Just leave him there. And number 1, Batman Dark Tomorrow. Now, Batman has had some stellar titles made for him over the years, but Batman Dark Tomorrow is not one of them. The Arkham series before the Arkham series was a thing, Dark Tomorrow had originally been intended to be a faithful, gritty take on the classic comics of old. This began to spiral away as developers Kemco were forced to scale back on features and stick to a Nintendo GameCube exclusive release. Right from its very first day on the shelves, the game was panned for its abysmal controls, wonky camera system, slow pace, and constant glitching. But the one single bit of praise it found itself picking up was in its cutscenes, which isn't exactly the number one priority for a video game. Nevertheless, the game concludes with several different endings, all of which leave a decent impact on players who manage to make it to the finale. Depending on whether or not the player had been able to deactivate Ra's al Ghul's weapon and win the final battle with him, Batman can either be mortally wounded and die in Talia's arms, or successfully disable Ra's al Ghul's system and kill him but be told that there's an override. Or you can defeat Ra's al Ghul but fail to stop the system. All deliciously dark endings to a pretty dark part of the Dark Knight's history. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 terrible video games with incredible endings. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ, but the O is a 0, or you can swing by Instagram where it's the same handle, RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Hope you're treating yourself with love and respect, my friend, because you deserve all of the best things in life, alright? And don't let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise. You are a massive ledge, and I want you to go out there and absolutely smash it today. I believe in ya. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.